Hi. Is this going to work? What do you think?
No.
Probably not. What's the elasticity of demand for in-person or for tuition if it goes online as compared to being in person? And how does that relate to very, very expensive schools? So I told my fellow professors that I thought that Ball State would have a higher enrollment, even though we're probably facing full online, and higher re-enrollment than someplace that's much, much more expensive and also might go online. Because the online quality of the education is similar, right? The difference between the quality of the education between the two experiences is similar when it's all Zoom U, right? I think I want to do a research study on that and see what actually happens. I don't know. Because it looks like we're headed for that. I hope not. It looks like we're headed for that. Hi, I'm Professor Snow. This is my second year teaching at Ball State. I love economics. I think about it all the time. And one of the things that I think is most important about economics is the conversation. So I have an alternative kind of definition for economics. What do you think economics is? Can you write down your definition for economics real quick, and then we'll compare? Take a moment and write down what your definition of economics is. Economics as the study of human behavior within the context of exchange relationships. The study of human behavior within the context of exchange relationships. And that's interesting because a lot of times, well, did anybody have the word scarcity in their definition? No? Okay, a lot of times economists define economics as the study of the efficient allocation of scarce resources that have alternative applications. Right? Efficiency and scarcity is near the fore of what a lot of we think about when we think about economics. The trick is, however, that animals are good at optimizing too. Right? Rats, if given the opportunity to go through a maze more than once, will improve on their performance in weaving through a maze, right? So animals optimize. Well, then what's peculiar about human beings? You see, economics is supposed to be a social science. In a lot of universities, actually, the economics department is in the Division of Social Sciences instead of in the School of Business. You go to a really big school, and sometimes there are actually two departments of economics, one in the business school and one in social sciences. Sometimes even three, because sometimes economists get involved in experimental stuff. Right? So then, if economics is a social science, then it's about people. And what makes people peculiar is our capacity to engage in exchanges. If you watch the videos on Canvas that I've uploaded, you'll learn a little bit more about that. One of the things that we do, or one of the ways that we engage in exchange, is to have an exchange of ideas. In other words, a conversation is also a form of exchange. Are you with me? Right? And when we get to macroeconomics, as compared to microeconomics, macroeconomics is about how we want for institutions to intervene into the market process in order to accomplish some goals that we share in common. What are some of the goals that we want those institutions to achieve? What kind of goals are goals that we think that big institutions have with respect to the overall economy? Anybody? Any kind of goal? What about inflation? What's the goal with respect to inflation? Do we want high inflation or low inflation? Typically low, right? Typically low. You had an answer for me earlier?
Yeah, I totally forgot.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. What about employment? Do we want high unemployment or low unemployment? We want low unemployment, right? What about GDP or productivity? Wealth. What do we want? High or low wealth? We want it to be growing, right? We want economic growth. So far, we agree. Okay. But what if there's an opportunity cost? You guys remember the term opportunity cost? Right? The cost of the next best alternative action is our opportunity cost. What if, in order to achieve lower inflation, we have to allow higher unemployment? What's the right trade-off or balance between unemployment and inflation? Who decides? Well, if we were in a dictatorship, the dictator decides, right? The dictator makes the decision for us. Are we in a dictatorship? It is yet to be seen. However, we presume that we are in a democracy. What's peculiar about democracy? What makes it a democracy? What makes it a democracy?
The people.
What about the people?
We don't make the rules, but we help enforce them, or create them.
How do we help create them?
Laws.
And how do we help make the laws? Sorry?
Government.
Through the government?
Yeah.
And how do we get the government?
People run for the chairs in the government.
And then what do we do? Huh?
Vote.
We vote, right? Is that how we participate in democracy? By voting? Is that what makes us a democracy, the fact that we vote? Communist countries have had elections, haven't they? It's like, we choose Stalin, check yes. There, you voted. It's a democracy. Voting is actually the least expensive, the least costly way to participate in politics. You do is you walk in and you check a bunch of boxes. Should it be surprising that the least expensive way to participate in a democracy is also the least effective way to participate in a democracy? Your vote hardly matters at all. I'm not saying you shouldn't vote. I'm not saying you should. I don't. I've got other reasons for not voting. Right? But it's the least effective way to participate in a democracy. The more effective ways of participating in democracy are to engage in the civil discussion, the conversation that's happening in the world. So I sent a letter to the editor of the Indy Star the other day because there was an issue that I had my own take on. And I thought, you know what? I can contribute to the conversation here by sharing my idea. And if they publish it, I don't know whether they will or not, if they publish it, how many votes is that one letter to the editor worth? In terms of influencing the broader conversation, that one letter to the editor might be worth 10 or 20 or 100 votes. Being engaged in a democracy requires the use and exercise of voice and exit. What do I mean by exit? Well, you can vote by leaving. Now, we're not saying you should leave the United States, but if you happen to live in Fishers and you think the property taxes are getting too high and you don't have kids, so you don't need a gorgeous yard, what might you do? You might move to a community that has lower property taxes. You might vote by leaving. So both voice and exit matter when it comes to the practice of democracy. How you doing? All right, come grab a wipe for your table. So, come grab a wipe, one of those wipes in that purple bag, and wipe off your desk before you sit down. So then, if if democracy is governance by discussion, and if conversation is a form of exchange, then we can start to think about politics as an exchange process and not just a power struggle. Does that make sense to you? To think about politics as an exchange process, not just a power struggle. Whenever we fall back on the power struggle approach to politics, we're no longer involved in an exchange process, and then there's no reconciliation. The word that I used in the videos to describe economics was catalactics, which is a very peculiar term, catalactics. It's a very old Greek word for exchange, but it also has the connotation of reconciliation. That between you and I, if there's a pile of goodies sitting there, we can fight over it, or we could have a conversation and come to some sort of a consensus about how we're going to divide the goodies. And if we can come to some sort of an agreement, we might both be made better off, because fighting over it could kill us both. But having the ability to have a conversation enables us to be both made better off in the process. Are you with me? So then, it becomes absolutely crucial that for us to have a good system of governance within which we engage, we have to be able to talk to one another. And in order to talk to one another, we have to be using the same language. But what I observe going on in the world today is that in politics, people are talking past one another. They're not even talking about issues as if they were on the same topic. The way that different political tribes talk about the same political issues doesn't make any sense. We're talking past one another. Actually, most of the talking that's occurring is people from one political tribe talking to other people in the same political tribe, trying to persuade them from listening to people from a different political tribe. In other words, they're building walls. Are you with me? Now, just because you have convictions and beliefs and believe in them strongly, that doesn't mean that you can't have a conversation with somebody with a different point of view. But if you close yourself off from it, from listening to other people's points of view, you miss out on the opportunity, one, to understand your own point of view better. And two, you miss out on opportunities to come to a consensus through exchange of ideas. You miss out on the opportunity to find out a better way. Unless you're so prideful that you believe that your own way is right without considering the other options, in which case, I ain't no talking with you, is there? There's no opportunity to grow. Is it important that we are involved in exchanges? Yeah. The growth of market processes, the development of transactions and market opportunities is how we got to be so wealthy today. How wealthy are we? How well off are we? You should be walking around with your jaw dragging on the floor, constantly, utterly astounded at how wealthy you are. Almost every single human being, through all of history, up until about the year 1800, lived off $3 a day in today's money. What could you buy for $3 a day? Some rice. You're wealthy beyond your full understanding. thing that I was talking with one of the other sections about was the fact that in the world today, you're not just competing with other Americans, but you're competing with the world. So Nigeria has a population of 200 million. And the United States has a population of 320 million. You know what language they speak in Nigeria? It's not Nigerian. It's English. They are English speakers, which means that if you are trying to get a job where the primary skill for doing that job well is how well you speak English, you have 200 million more people that you're competing against. And Nigeria is almost fully online. You have a lot of competition out there. If your primary talent is that you're good at math, there's probably 3 or 4 billion people between China and India that are also competing for whatever work you're hoping to do. So the bad news is that there's a lot of competition out there. And that's the world that you're entering into, which is very different from the world that I entered into, and even more different from the world that your grandparents entered into, where there was a lot less competition. So, you have to learn and study hard. You have to study hard because there's a lot of competition out there. And when you graduate, you're not done. Because when you graduate, there's still going to be more kids in China and Nigeria getting their educations and trying to enter into the market to compete against you for opportunities. So when then do you get to stop? Never. The reason why a lot of people who were primarily employed in manufacturing found themselves without jobs is because they hadn't continued to train for the next thing. You have to perpetually, over your whole lives, always be training for the next thing. Because who knows what direction the economy is going to swing in. And we can learn a little bit about that here. Become a little bit better at predicting that. But we don't know. On the other hand, we're more wealthy than we've ever been. And not just us. In particular, not us. The people in the developing world, the people who are living on $3 a day or less, the number of people who are living that way has dramatically decreased. Almost everybody who was in that bottom layer has moved up and into the middle. You can split up the middle into a couple of different layers. They're kind of in the second level now, where they have enough money for food and they can send their kids to school. Almost the whole world has moved up out of that bottom level. It's absolutely astounding. This has happened within the last 20 years. That these people have moved up into this level. It's astounding. It's exciting. And it's better to live in a rich neighborhood than a poor neighborhood. And the world is becoming a wealthy neighborhood. Okay, so economics is about exchange. And we're really, really, really wealthy, and we don't fully appreciate how wealthy we are. How can we show that? Suppose we're in the market to buy a car. Okay, we're going to buy a car. And there's somebody out there who's selling their car for $10,000. That is their willingness to sell price. Now, I'm willing to pay $16,000 for a good car. That is my willingness to pay price. What price will we agree upon? What is the right price in this exchange? Write down a number. What do you think the right price is in this exchange? Okay. What price did you write down?
10,000.
10,000. How many said 10,000? That's a lot of people. Okay, a lot of you say 10,000. So many. Anybody have something different than 10,000? Come on, somebody had to say something. What did you have?
12,000.
12,000? Okay. If we're trying to be fair, if we're trying to achieve justice in the world, what would be the right price? 13,000? Right? Would that be the just price? I think that a lot of us made an assumption here that there was a car sitting somewhere with a sticker on it that said $10,000. Right? What if there wasn't a price revealed ahead of time? I mean, if you're going to sell a car, right, and you're hoping to get $10,000 out of it, is that how much you're going to put on the car? Is that what you're going to put on the sticker? No. Okay then. Right? So then if there's no sticker, how many of you would change your $10,000 answer? Yeah, okay. Okay. What if there are 5 cars for sale and there are 10 buyers? What do we expect to happen?
A bidding war.
A bidding war such that?
The price will increase.
That's right. The price will increase, won't it? What if there are 10 for sale and 5 buyers? What'll happen? Sorry?
A lower price.
A lower price. When the price goes up, who is bidding the price up?
People who are selling it?
The buyers.
People who are buying it are bidding the price up, right? So the buyers are competing against whom? Other buyers. When the price is going down, it's sellers that are competing against other sellers that bid the price down. Is this how we usually think about it? When the price of a good is really, really high, who do we usually accuse?
The buyer.
The companies that sell the good, don't we? Like, man, they're charging too much for that. That price is too high. Well, if the price really is too high, what will happen? They'll go out of business, won't they? They won't sell any. Who bids prices up? Buyers. Competing for the good. There's an exception, monopolies, right? But even then, they still run into a demand curve at some point. Okay. So then, $13,000 is the right price, isn't it? Well, not necessarily then either. As an economist, suppose that the car does sell for $13,000. What does that mean for the buyer? They were willing to pay $16,000, but they only paid $13,000. So what?
He saved.
He's got an extra $3,000 to spend on something else, doesn't he? He's made better off to the tune of $3,000. What do we call that? Surplus. That is the surplus to the consumer. So he is made better off by $3,000. What about the seller? Seller would have been willing to sell for $10,000, but instead they got $13,000. So how do they feel? They got $3,000 extra, don't they? They're better off by $3,000. What if instead the car had sold for $11,000? What then? Well, then the buyer would have $5,000 in surplus, and the seller would have $1,000 in surplus. What do we notice?
They're the same.
The surplus is the same. What's different? The distribution of the surplus. Who gets more of the surplus? So we tend to think that in a just world, right, everybody gets an equal share of the surplus. Suppose I have 5 watermelons for sale. Right? 5 watermelons for sale. I'm willing to sell my watermelons for $3. The average consumer is willing to buy a watermelon for $5. If I sell all of those watermelons for $4, I get $5 of surplus and consumers get, so I get $5 of surplus and consumers get $5 of surplus. But who gets more of the surplus overall? I got more surplus than the buyers did, didn't I? Huh. So what happens in the real world? Who tends to capture a greater share of the surplus in most transactions? Is it buyers or sellers? Sellers. How many agree? Sellers tend to get most of the surplus. It depends, doesn't it? It depends. But that's how we tend to think about it. Can I give you a counterexample? Okay. How many of you own a smartphone? How much is your smartphone worth? Ballpark. 800? Anybody 600? That neighborhood? You can probably get like, I have a Samsung Galaxy 8, right? I could probably get another one of those for around 600 if I searched, right? Because it's not the most recent one. How many of you remember the Motorola Razr? You guys remember the Motorola Razr flip phone? That was the bomb. People loved that thing, right? How much were those when they first came out? How much did those cost?
Probably like $300 or $400.
$600. Back in the day. $600. So, I got a deal for you. I'll give you a Motorola Razr, and you give me your smartphone, and we'll call it a deal. How many are willing to trade? That's about what I expected, okay? How much more would I have to give you? How much would I have to pay you to be willing to accept a Motorola Razr in exchange for your smartphone and the condition that you never get another smartphone again? You're stuck with the Razr forever. How much would I have to pay you?
A lot more than $600.
A lot more than 600. Give me a number.
I guess it would depend on the person.
Here's $600, right? Who's selling me their smartphone? Who's getting into this deal for $1,000?